Up next, a session of ethical decision making. I was hearing from her, and I got so curious to hear what she has to say. She is amazing. I want to call her on stage. Please sit down. Welcome, Rashmi Airan. Go for it. Oh, sure.
Okay. Thank you to Emerge and to Melissa for having me. I'm so excited to be here. It was a short hearing, only 10 minutes in a large, nearly empty courtroom in downtown Miami. It was me, my attorney, and the judge. I was there to plead guilty to a federal crime. The judge asked me questions like, do you understand you're giving up your right to vote? I'm screaming on the inside. I've voted in every election since I turned 18. My knees began to buckle. Yes, sir. Do you understand you're giving up your right to serve on a jury? I can never have the privilege to serve on a jury again. My attorney had to put his hand on my back just to hold me up as I respond yes to every question, knowing I must be strong. If the judge thinks I'm not being honest about owning it, I could face 20 years in prison. That evening, I sat at a high-top table at a chain restaurant you'd all recognize with my sweet, brilliant 9-year-old son. He is an avid reader, and he's just finished reading John Grisham's book series for kids, where he's learned all about mortgages and bank lending. We positioned the stools to face one another. We sat knee to knee, and as I took his hands in mine, I said, today, Mommy had to plead guilty to a federal crime. You see, I did not want my son to Google my name and learn about what I did from anybody else. It was better that he heard it from me. He said, did you do what they say you did? Yes. Did you hurt anybody? Yes. I dug deep to answer him completely. Even though Mommy did something wrong, I'm still your mommy. And more than anything, I want you and your sister to still be proud of me. But Mommy, I will always be proud of you. And I'm even more proud of you now for having the courage to do this. But do you think you're going to have to go away? I don't know, honey. We'll find out at my sentencing hearing. I grew up in a home where I thought I had to be flawless. Like most first-generation Americans, I expected myself to be the perfect daughter, the perfect sister, the perfect friend, the perfect student. My parents are both from India, and as I felt that cultural drive to achieve, I also put a lot of pressure on myself to be infallible. So I was the good girl, the nerd, involved in everything, top of my class in high school, at UNC Chapel Hill, and at Columbia Law School. If there had been an award given for least likely to go to prison, it would have been given to me. I was strong. I knew all the answers. I did not need help, and I certainly thought that I was untouchable. So I bet you're wondering, if that's true, how did you go from Miss Goody Two-Shoes with an immovable moral compass to a guilty plea? Well, for me, it started when an important client asked me to backdate a document that he just forgot to do. He asked me to engage in some creative transactions that one might suspect aren't right. But I didn't ask the hard questions, the ones that would have made all those deals fall through. This is the slippery slope that before you notice becomes a downward spiral. You make a split-second decision to do something once that you normally wouldn't do. And one thing becomes two. Eventually, you find yourself doing something over and over, unaware that a pattern has set in. The consequences for my actions were lighter than for some, more severe than we had hoped. I spent about 6 months in a federal prison. I had a lot of time to wonder how this could happen to a good girl raised by great parents, raising terrific kids. How could I let this happen to me? I was now just a number. 05121-104. I wore paper clothing between facilities. I was handcuffed and shackled with a waist chain. And every few weeks, my parents and children, 9 and 10 at the time, drove 10 hours round trip just to hug and to kiss me, to talk and to play games with me. I can still remember my daughter's tight embrace as the guard's clock would hit 3 and she would plead with me, "Mommy, don't go." I believe I'm now living a life of purpose. Instead of avoiding or struggling against my bad judgment, I use that government-imposed time to move into deep reflection about how to turn my profound remorse into making a difference. I've reflected on my journey and the bad decisions that I made that I knew I had to own up to. I'm a good person who made some bad decisions. So, what have I done since coming home 2 years ago? I have made ethical decision-making at the forefront of my mind in everything I do. And I believe it starts with the intention to do the right thing and then the commitment to stand by that desire. Have any of you ever had a red flag in your life that you should probably pay attention to? Come on. About anything? The truth is, red flags arise daily. It's part of life, business, relationships. But we are charged with the duty that when these red flags emerge, we identify them and then have the courage to address them. My life experiences have given me a unique awareness and appreciation of red flags. I ask you to consider this. If we can learn the tools of ethical decision-making, could it ultimately lead to ethical vigilance in everything we do? We are each born, and we start off trying to do the right thing, right? My grandfather, my Dadaji, Banarsi Das Saraf, was a freedom fighter with Mahatma Gandhi during the Quit India movement against British rule. It turns out that he, along with others, at times failed in those efforts. In fact, on the day that my father was born, he was actually in prison with Gandhi. Yet, he always picked himself up, grew stronger, and kept finding opportunities to stand up for what he knew was right. He was a fighter with a tenacious spirit who never gave up, even though, in the end, he never really knew if he was going to be successful in achieving his goal of India's independence. I learned about my grandfather, stories from my parents growing up, from a very early age. I followed that straight and narrow path. I was the one who always colored between the lines. I desperately wanted to make my parents proud of me, to achieve that dream that they had worked so hard to get to by coming here. But like others, I grew up. I set goals, and my life was set on autopilot. Have any of you ever had that feeling like you're moving towards a goal and you start moving around the race course, and now you're moving so fast, you just can't get off the track? I thought, I'm a good person. Therefore, I make ethical decisions, right? This is common, but it's faulty. It's so easy to neglect the morality of what we're doing in the moment, and we just do. And then we move on to the next task at hand. Don't you know how that is? You're just so busy in your day that you make a quick or maybe less complicated decision because you have so much to do that day and you're just trying to check off the list. Because if you were anything like me, I did not want to ask for help. I needed to do it all. Because, of course, I was trying to be perfect and hold everything together. So, have any of you been in a car lately and you start backing up and the red light on your camera starts blinking, the alarm starts ringing annoyingly because you're about to hit a car or maybe a pole or a tree? So what do? We hit the brake and stop, right? And you reposition yourself. Okay, so if the default is, I am good, therefore I am ethical, how do you know that there is a warning and you are being challenged ethically? Because the thing is, the warning signs are there. It is just so easy to make decisions without considering the morality of the consequences that we're facing. And these decisions are in all aspects of our lives, every single day. So, can we identify the red flags? An external sign that what you're about to do just isn't quite right. In my case, there were several red flags that I completely ignored in the moment. But in hindsight, I've been able to see. I was a real estate attorney. And in 2007, I met a real estate developer who was doing what similar developers were doing across the country. He was engaging in creative transactions, which was he was selling units to buyers, condominium units, with some incentives. And I was so focused on financial stability and dollar signs and prestige and appearances that I drove full force ahead, started doing closings almost immediately without doing my due diligence. One time, a potential new developer client that I was trying to get as a new client asked me to talk about this process, the transaction. He referred me to his attorney, and the attorney went over the details of the transaction, and the next day I get an email from this attorney, who, by the way, was so much more experienced than I was. And in the email he says, I believe what you are doing is mortgage fraud. Okay, yes. Now you would think that the hairs on my neck would stand straight up, right? Do you think that I called him? How did you get this conclusion? Do you think I looked closer at my files? I did not. I looked the other way and completely ignored his comments. You know what I was thinking? I'm smart. I know all the answers. He's an old-timer. He's not creative enough. He doesn't think outside of the box. So what was I doing? I was rationalizing that red flag away. Sometimes red flags show up in the worst possible time when we definitely are not paying attention to the details. So on December 24th, 2007, at around 8 p.m., I was in a bedroom with my kids making them sleep. And it happened to be that particular year, my entire family, uncles, aunties, cousins, nephews, nieces, sister, everybody descended into Miami for a family reunion of sorts. So I'm in the bedroom. My kids were 2 and 3. The crib was on one side, the toddler bed on the other, and I was sitting in the middle of my glider, singing them to sleep, as I always did to coax them to sleep. And I looked down at my BlackBerry. You guys remember those, right? And this email is from a realtor regarding a closing that was happening 2 days later. And in that email, there was one line and one attachment. The line read something like this: buyer to receive $72,000 after closing and rental guarantee. Okay, this was definitely a red flag. In real estate, no buyer should ever be receiving any money or financial benefit from a purchase. And I knew this. But the kids were not yet sleeping. I had a house full of relatives. It was almost Christmas morning and none of my presents were wrapped. So I rationalized making it acceptable, legal, and thereby ethical. I immediately forwarded that email to my closing coordinator without even opening the attachment. I relied on her to let me know if there was a legal lapse in any of the documents in the attachment. I expected that it would be okay. Do you know that that one email was part of the main evidence against me by the government? Dissension will come. And sometimes the doubters are wrong, but it is our responsibility when feedback comes that we don't necessarily like to actually review it on its merits objectively, not just simply dismissing it because it just doesn't fit our goals. Ethical vigilance requires that we pay attention to the red flags because they aren't always orderly and they show up at bad times. We have to pay attention to them, whether it's convenient or not. So what's the most influential of red flags? It's that gut instinct. It can be a whisper that you choose to ignore, or that stomach-clenching feeling that something just isn't right. You know what I wish? I wish that I had listened to that senior attorney's email. I wish that I would have allowed myself to be more curious and open that attachment before forwarding it. Because what happens? We fall prey to confirmation bias. So confirmation bias is when we sort our beliefs into categories and we don't let any other information come in unless it meets the beliefs that we have to achieve our goals. There's something called motivational blindness. Motivational blindness is when you don't even recognize the facts that are literally sitting right in front of you because you're steamrolling ahead towards your goal. You don't want to take the time to pay attention to anything that doesn't help you meet your goal. So you just discard it. And you don't think anything of it. Okay, you guys are all saying, I get it. I do not want this to be me. So what do I do when I do identify a red flag? How do I identify what my motivations are? What am I supposed to do? When red flags give us an alert, how do we identify our motivations? And yes, it is possible. Have any of you ever left a meeting early because you got to run and pick up your daughter from basketball practice? Or your mother's sick and you're not only financially responsible, but you want to be there for her? Or your significant other is at home and he wants to spend more time with you? Or you volunteer for the gala at school and you miss that meeting and deadline that you're supposed to accomplish something? Or you have your own business and you're worried about operating cash flow and meeting that next payroll. And the thing is it's so easy to identify these as isolated factors in our lives. But when you can realize that everything is linked together, it'll click. Everything influences the decisions that we make in our lives. Just like that backup signal on the car, it's an alert. Red flags are there for our safety. to warn us so we can acknowledge what our motivations are and then change our course of action as we need to. Entrepreneurs face unique risk factors. Female entrepreneurs have to work twice as hard to get half the recognition and half the funding, right? There are risks that we all bear, and they may not reap desired rewards. Because on the one hand, you have this, and on the other hand, you have that. And which one are you going to choose? Which one's the right hand in the long run? Which one is the right decision? Can you imagine that funders or investors might indirectly pressure you to make some bad decisions in order to achieve some artificially created milestone? A funder doesn't necessarily have goals that meet the community's best interests or even matches our own moral compass. And leaders of entrepreneurial ventures are wearing so many hats that it's very hard sometimes to focus on one thing at one time with full attention. So cue back to my Christmas Eve email, right? Red flags can have inconvenient timing. It's essential to pause. We have to pause. Have I looked over all the details? Did I miss some decisions, skip over some questions that I should have asked? Did I miss some I's that I left undotted? Was I supposed to cross some T's? If not, good for you. But if you have, you know what to do. We have to be confident enough to question the decisions in our lives, any feedback, any challenges that come up, so we can examine our decisions on their merits. We can learn the tools of ethical decision making. When challenges come, we can't just discard them. And take it from me, these risks are real. And you can suffer serious problems with dire consequences. We are the thought leaders. We see things others don't. And it pays off, often. When others are cautious, we act. And people doubt us all the time. The sometimes difficult distinction is when to know, how to know when thinking outside of the box is thinking outside of the law. And then being able to recognize that sometimes what may seem legal or be legal may not necessarily be ethical. And then having the courage to stand up and take and change your course of action. Because we want to be good people, good leaders, good citizens. We must balance our gifts for innovation and vision while still remaining humble. Ethical vigilance, when we can commit to ethical decision making, it's better for our companies, our greater society, and ourselves. Thank you.